Hello, this is Darren DePaul, the voice of Emperor Valkorion, and you're watching another video by Vulkk.
Greetings, everyone. Welcome to today's special live stream event. Thank you very much for joining. I do see that we have quite a big audience today. Thank you all for coming live. For those of you who are not able, obviously, to join live, the video should be available if I don't screw things up as a normal VOD later on today or maybe tomorrow. Today's live stream is special for several events. First, because I haven't done something like that ever before. Second, because I do hope that we will hear and maybe see some interesting things. Maybe we won't see. My guest will tell us when, why, and how. First, I would like to mention that I do have a big disclaimer. Everything that you're going to hear today from me or from my two guests is subject to change because it's about 4 weeks before the actual release of 5.9, which will be the main topic of today's discussion. I'm hoping that they will touch a little bit more on what's coming after 5.9, maybe 5.10, maybe 5.11. God knows about the summer events or other things like that. We will have a very important question asked in the very beginning before you actually start the 5.9 discussion. But before this, allow me please to introduce my guests. We do have the person that owns more Star Wars costumes than the number of Star Wars The Old Republic characters I have in the game. Charles Boyd, community. Charles Boyd is a creative director for Star Wars The Old Republic. Hey, Charles. And we do have the person that's responsible for roughly 93% of the yellow text on the official forums. Community manager E.Musco is here with us. Eric. Please, guys, with just a couple words before we begin, tell us who you are and what's your job at Bioware.
Overall
Whoa.
planning and
let me stop you. There was a huge issue on my side. Sound was not working, so we'll have to start over again. That's about 2 minutes lost. Okay. Welcome everyone once
it was
again.
Perfect up to this point.
It was. Usually perfect things fail. I knew that something is going to fail, and that's the first fail for today. Hopefully no more. Okay, my apologies, guys, about the fuck-ups. Hopefully you're able to hear me and my guests in a moment. So, Charles,
hello.
Please tell us who you are and what do you do at Bioware.
Yeah, so I'm Charles Boyd. I'm the creative director for Star Wars The Old Republic. What that kind of means day to day is I oversee everything in terms of the design of the game. So that's both long-term planning. We're going to do a Flashpoint here or a daily area here or an operation here. Obviously I work in conjunction with Keith quite a bit, our producer for the game, and Brooks, who's our development director. Between the three of us, we kind of work out long-term planning and strategy and the different sorts of features we want to do and what we think we can achieve in a given time period. And then also sort of all the way down to the nitty gritty, what would be a cool boss in this scenario? What kinds of storylines do we want players to be undertaking over this next bit of stuff following, say, Nathema, like we're about to come to. Will we get there and back? Yes, no. I have a lot of say in that those sorts of matters. Just pretty much anything that gets to be fun and creative, I get to do. So I feel very lucky.
Okay, thank you, Eric. What's your responsibility besides filling the forums with colorful texts?
That's most of it. No, my job, so community manager, my job goes one of two directions. I work with the dev team. I work closely with Keith, Charles, and everybody on the dev team to take information from them and communicate it out to the players. And then the inverse is true where I'm in most of the design meetings with Charles and some of the higher level planning to talk about kind of player feedback on, things they want to see, things they want to see changed, bug reports, all the stuff that comes from players passing that feedback back onto the team.
Thank you. The first and most important question for today and hopefully for the future as well. Why does Bioware not talk about content updates beyond the 2 or 3 month future mark? What's stopping you guys? Why can't you provide us with details about what's happening next winter, maybe next summer?
So
whose overload's fault is this?
Keith, can we blame Keith?
Yeah, he's not here.
I was thinking higher than Keith.
100% Keith's fault. But secondary to that, that's an interesting question, right? Because if you look, like we've talked about the fact that there's an expansion being planned, and I can tell you that that's not coming in the next 2 or 3 months. So we're already talking about things outside of 2 or 3 months. But I think some of the crux of that is, why don't we talk specifics outside of the next 2 or 3 months? And the real honest answer is just because stuff changes. Obviously, your disclaimer of everything is subject to change, I say it all the time as well, is because it's true. In some cases, that's because we look at how things are coming in the production side and actually getting the work done and tested and everything. And sometimes it just isn't going to work. Sometimes we look at player feedback on things they want to see that we are doing, things that they don't even know we're working on, we kind of get the sense that they don't want. We'll move away from that. So by us not talking specifics too far out, it honestly gives us a lot of flexibility in being able to change things that people don't know about necessarily. So that's kind of why we don't talk about specifics. And also because it obviously creates a really a lot of friction when we're like, this thing is coming in 4 months and here's what it is, and then it doesn't come in 4 months and we've changed it, or it doesn't happen at all. Because when you're that far out, we kind of have that flexibility still. So I think that's probably the main.
A quick add-up, if you allow me to that question. What does it have to do with Disney and EA? Perhaps if you can tell us. Is there a relation? Because I know that Disney never releases any information early. So does EA. That's a huge problem with all the other Star Wars games from EA, such as the Battlefront 2 game.
Right.
I mean, I think there's definitely some stuff, like, we're not going to dive super deep into like businessy things, right? But like as a publicly traded company, there's things that come into some of that. But that's really, that's genuinely not it, right? Like, even if it was like, you have free reign to talk about anything whenever you want, we still wouldn't talk more than generally about things that are coming far out. Kind of like, there is an expansion coming. That's, who knows, it's months away.
What's in it? We're still working that out. So.
Right, because we don't want to say like, guarantee there's 10 more levels, and then if we come out and it's 5 more levels, everyone's gonna be like, but I thought there was 10 more levels, because things change constantly, right? So we don't want to talk too far.
Will be a change to the level cap then, like with every other expansion.
Seems likely, but
we're not gonna say that because who knows? So that's kind of the point, right? It's because of that. It gives us flexibility, and honestly, like, it's one of the things that is true of software development. Like, stuff changes all the time on a terrifying degree. Things changes all the time, so just need to have that flexibility. But we will tell you as much as we can, as often as we can.
Yeah, thank you for that. Let's begin with the big reveals. Most of them have already been revealed for those of the players who follow websites, fan websites, and mostly the official forums. But let's start talking about 5.9. It still is scheduled for release on 1st of May, right?
Yep. 100%.
First big question. Why did you decide to bring us to the Dead Planet once again? There must be a connection to Revan, the Revan novel. Maybe Mitri is coming back.
There is not a connection to I mean, it's mentioned in like the Revan novel, like you mentioned. I would say it's closer to being a connection to Valkorion or Vitiate. He's not coming back before anyone freaks out. He's definitely dead. But it is there is a connection to him and his past that is what brings the player and their opponents to this particular planet.
Can you tell us any insights?
It was also kind of a chance to show some changes to that world. How has it changed now that Valkorion Vitiate is gone? And we were kind of interested to see what we could do to show that change in progression.
Share, please, any even small insights about the story of the Flashpoint without, of course, revealing spoilers. I imagine most of the audience would not be pleased with spoilers today, but tell us something. Maybe the first opening, maybe the description of the quest that we get when we start it.
It starts actually not on Nathema. I'll tell you that much. There's actually a little extra step on a... I'm deciding how much to say. There's a space station scenario, brief little interlude beforehand that kind of sets up and kind of puts your player on the path to Nathema as a result of it. So that's one thing that sets it apart from the other story flashpoints we've done up to this point. Obviously, you're going to be encountering Theron. He's going to be very, very involved in the storyline of this flashpoint. This one probably has the most story, cinematic sequences and everything of all the flashpoints we've done this year. That's when you're playing, of course, the solo story mode. If you're playing multiplayer, skip all that, as we've been doing. But so lots of Theron. That whole storyline will be resolved. You will know what is up by the end of it. I hesitate to say any more, though, because I wouldn't want to give anything away.
Is this a closure to the story arc or just a piece that would follow with the next update to the game?
A closure, very much.
Okay. Can we get now into the specifics of the Flashpoints in terms of gameplay, technical details, please? Let's say share a little bit about the amount of story that's part of this, let's call it chapter, because it's not exactly a chapter. I don't know what it is. Obviously,
Right.
it's not just a Flashpoint.
Compare
the content of 5.9 with 5.6, maybe.
Yeah.
Because 5.6
I mean,
was a little bit light on cinematics and story.
Yeah, this one's definitely much heavier than 5.6 was. There's a lot more scenes during the Flashpoint and more scenes, maybe be more fair to say bigger scenes before and after. And like I said, there's also that whole sort of extra step before you even go to Nathema that tells some extra story as well. So this is definitely the most story-heavy piece of Flashpoint content that we've released this year, or over the last 12 months, I guess I should say. Right. And it has a lot of ground to cover for reasons that I can't divulge at this time. But yeah, I think players should be very satisfied. I'm looking forward to seeing their responses.
Okay, what about the difficulty modes available for this Flashpoint?
Same as the last couple, as Capero and Nambara. So there'll be a solo
challenge. It wouldn't be harder.
It's not intended to be harder. We'll put it that way. Sometimes we get caught by surprise, but the plan is not for it to be particularly easier or harder than the previous ones, to be kind of in line.
Okay, tell me about the boss encounters. How many do we have? What can we expect there in terms of boss mechanics, rewards?
Yeah.
Loot?
So there are 4 main boss encounters, which is a little bit different in that the sort of end boss is actually sort of 2 bosses that happen back to back. Then there's also
another?
Yeah. I think you get a break in between though. It's tied to the storyline, which will make sense when you get there. And then hashtag spoilers. And then there's also 1 bonus boss as well.
So that's 5 in total, including the bonus boss.
That's right. One of them involves a ton of lasers and spinning around. Yeah. I'm going to say that.
Sure does.
What else do I?
Sure does.
We'll leave it at that. There's lots more that you could say.
First one involves a lot of running.
Yeah, you really got to run from that guy. And the last one is
or a lot of dying in our case.
Yeah, we were playing it
early playtest though, balances on quite there, but
yeah,
a lot of dying.
Yeah.
I assume the Flashpoint will be available for low-level players, maybe.
I'm pretty confident that will mirror the same things we did with Capero and Nambara as well.
So it will mask the important parts of the story cutscenes with something else.
Yeah. Still, if you're really, really concerned about it, the safest way is to play it solo first before you do anything else. That's always going to be the best bet. We're going to do our absolute best, but even if we don't tell you who the character is that might have done a thing that made you do this quest step, a savvy person could figure it out. So, it's safest way is to just play the story first before you do it multi, but we will do our best.
What can we expect as a reward for our efforts from doing the Flashpoint more than once, maybe more than twice for the story? What's in there? Loot?
We've actually got a kind of a cool spread of rewards. We've got a ton of decorations coming out of this one. I forget the exact number, but it was like more than 10, more than 15 even, I think. We've got a new companion drop. This is a simpler kind of companion, not a story character, but it's based off of an ad in one of those boss fights, the laser heavy one that I mentioned. So it's a pretty neat little bonus, and also a new armor set.
And then the things that I talked about yesterday as well, which Master Mode will drop the Unbound schematics for the new augments as well in Master Mode. I think when I was talking to the team, I think it's possible that the last boss on Veteran might have a low chance of dropping them as well, but for now, just stick with definitely Master Mode.
Still working through that.
Yep.
Okay. Can you estimate the duration of the whole story experience, the Flashpoint before it and after it? How long would it be? Like an hour and a half, maybe?
I think probably an hour is a good starting. It might be even a little longer than that. It's hard to guess when you include the story cinematics because people move through those at very different rates than others. But it's definitely on the long side, potentially longer even than Capero, just because there is extra story comparatively. And it is still, in terms of the overall size of the physical space, it's roughly the same as Capero.
Okay, a little bit on the downside. I want to mention that I was supposed to have something special to show here at this point while we're talking about Nathema.
Yep.
Yes, I've learned to call it Nathema and not Nathema as I usually prefer. So, Eric, why don't we have the exclusive materials today?
Yeah, so one of the things that we were trying to do is we were trying to make sure that Vulkk could have really the first time anyone would see anything from inside the new Nathema Flashpoint. We have a whole process we have to go through to get screenshots out, really just because we want to make sure everyone's on board with really what we show as the first thing that people
First impressions are everything.
First impressions are everything. So
and as we mentioned, Nathema has changed a bit since the last time you've been there, so it's not as simple as you might think.
Yep. So we started putting all that together really toward the end of this week anyway. Funny enough, if you're watching the VOD of this, even like right after, Vulkk may have it already because we probably will have it
Very shortly.
Probably right after this interview is done. Like probably right now, my inbox probably says, "Here's the screenshot. Give it to Vulkk." But on the off chance that it doesn't happen, it could happen next week. But yes, no matter what, I will make sure Vulkk gets the first time that someone gets to see the inside of Nathema's Flashpoint. So it's coming.
Thank you for doing that. I did not request it. I was hoping it will be available on the stream to show right now, right here, but it's still a good gesture. Thank you. Okay, I think, well, it didn't. Hey guys, as you can expect, yes, this is an issue on my side because the internet dropped and I'm still unable to connect with E.Musco and Boyd. I'm trying to. I knew this is going to happen. It's been raining outside all day and, well, just because I have something special planned for today, it had to happen. It's a shame, really. What's weird is that the internet is back, the live stream is, sorry, still on. So thanks for the patience. You have a limited time, unfortunately, so that means you have probably some things will have to be cut off. Hey guys.
Can you hear us?
Yeah, that was an issue on my part. I do apologize.
Weird.
I've already apologized to my stream. It's been raining all day. Something was bound to happen.
No,
So because we've lost a few minutes.
No, you're good. Our Skype literally just put like missed call like 80 times just
in
randomly
1
out of
second.
nowhere.
Yeah, it was very weird.
Yeah, same for me. Okay, let's move on quickly without wasting any more time. Let's move on to the class changes. You did post quite a lot on the forums yesterday. Would you mind walking us through the class changes? Why does the Sentinel Marauder get special attention? Why did you delete the Skunk Tank possibility and things like that?
So I'll talk about, so Marauders is pretty easy. We talked a little bit about it in the post, but I believe it was Fury specifically was overperforming just a little bit. And so we made one of the passives of one of their abilities take like a 20%-ish, nerf a little less than that, just to kind of bring their damage down just a little bit. And then Obfuscate was strong because what it created was a situation where if someone got obfuscated, they literally couldn't get CC'd. Marauders just were unable to be CC'd, which was not fun because it meant there was an ability with no counterplay, which isn't really a fun experience for someone on the receiving end. So we changed it instead to be 75% damage reduction as opposed to 75% mischance. So it takes RNG out of playing against Obfuscate, and it still allows the Marauder to have survivability, but there is counterplay for the other class. So those are kind of the changes that happened for Marauder and Sentinel. So the class change. So let's talk about Skank Tanks for a second. So the changes were really simple, but there was two things, and I want to make sure to highlight the two things. So I know everyone's really focusing on the fact that we did these changes to bring Skank Tanks in line, which is true, but don't forget the second part of it, which is even just without Skank Tanks being in the equation, tanks were doing more damage than the team intended. So the nerf to damage for tanks, yes, it will impact Skank Tanks, but that is not the only reason we made the change. They were doing too much damage. So we brought damage down across the board for tanks in the game. Now, players did bring up very, very good points, which is something the team talked about a lot internally as well, is that part of the problem with tanks in PvP is the way defense works and how it relates to internal and elemental damage. All of that is completely true, and it's definitely something the team is aware of and looking into. But part of that is if we change how stats impact damage reduction in PvP, you're talking about very large systemic changes to itemization and how it impacts damage reduction. That's kind of like expansion level stuff where you're talking about things of
really big stat adjustments.
What stats do, what they affect. That's really big stuff that would need to happen. So the team is definitely aware of it, and there may be some more elegant, more future changes that we can do to address things like that.
And keep suggestions coming, of course.
And please keep suggestions coming because there's a lot of really good suggestions. But at least for the interim, because tanks were doing too much damage, that got reduced, which should also help some of the skank tanking problems. We do understand that that may not correct all of the problems people feel like tanks have in PvP, not lost on us at all, but this is kind of a first step because of that. So that's kind of the changes we made.
And then obviously raising the threat generation.
Right, and raising, correct. We're raising threat generation to make sure that was also not a problem. And then the other thing we made is pretty much across the board utility buffs for damage reduction for certain classes. Again, we know that still highlights some other problems of concerns about like lightning and sages and sorks not doing enough damage, especially compared to mercs. None of that is lost on us either. But again, this was kind of a first step to increase some of the damage reduction related to some of those classes, something we'll continue to monitor for future changes.
So this is actually not a continuation with fixes as a relation to what you did several patches ago. This is a new, how should I put it? This is a new beginning of changes to the classes, new balancing.
Yes,
perhaps.
Yeah. Yes and no. I mean, I guess that's kind of a way to look at it.
Obviously, it was based on data gathered since the last set of changes. So in a way, it's based off of those changes.
Right.
But
it's the same boulder sort of that's rolling. Like especially the changes to tanks specifically, where there was rebalancing across the board for DPS classes to understanding where they fell in relation to each other, and then as kind of the fallout from that, we looked at what tanks were doing, and tanks were doing a little too much. So.
How do you expect these changes specifically to the tank's damage will reflect on PvE?
It's a very good question, and it's something that definitely was a concern with the team. One of the things that actually the team had talked about, the changes when we were looking at them originally could have potentially been even more than what we did, but we wanted to be very sensitive to the fact that someone who's a solo player that plays a tank in tank gear, they're going to do quite a bit less damage than they did before, and that's a negative impact to their play experience. So we need to be cautious of that understanding of balancing PvP, operations play and solo play against each other means that this is going to have a negative impact against other people as well. And that's why I wanted to really highlight the fact that this change was not just made for skank tanks. This was made because tanks across the board were doing more damage than the team intended. So it's something we're going to continue to monitor. But the thing to keep in mind is, and we highlighted this a lot last year when we talked about damage calculations across the board for DPS classes, is that our game across the board, like the new ops encounters from Gods from the Machine, etc., they are all balanced against the balance targets that the combat team has. So when we say that tanks were doing too much damage, that means that even when their damage gets reduced following 5.9, that should still fall in line with what Gods from the Machine was balanced against. So it may seem like it's negatively impactful, and I understand that people are used to the damage that it exists right now, but the game is actually balanced against the balanced targets, not what's in the game currently. So when we're moving things around the balanced targets, there shouldn't be a large negative impact to the way things are in game. Everything should still be beatable and should still be playable, but that's the stuff we're going to monitor in data to make sure that that's actually true. Because if it's not, there's a problem and we need to correct it the other way.
Okay, let's make a slow transition towards the new augments. And how exactly is the new augment tier 240 related to the class changes? Do they have actually anything in common?
Nope. That's actually a great question. So one of the things, and I think we talked about it a little bit before, but it's definitely something good to hit on, is that when we talked about balanced targets, that does not account for the new augments. Right. So if you get the new augments, you are actually overpowered by design, overpowered over the balanced targets. And that's for all classes across the board. Tanks, DPS, doesn't matter. So if you have the new augments, you're actually going above and beyond, which is why we stated that we know everyone is going to try to go get those augments, but the only people that we even look at that may need it is people that are trying to do progression content. So if you're in a guild trying to push against veteran mode gods from the machine, but you're having a little bit of trouble, well, by getting these augments, you're actually overpowered based on our design targets. So you should
hopefully make it a little simpler.
It should make it a little easier to beat.
Okay, can you tell us, you did mention earlier, how can we obtain the new augments, the schematics, the crafting materials? Details about the crafting required materials.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the schematics themselves will drop as unbound. And so to highlight what that means is when you get it, it's not bound to you at all. Unless you use it, you can sell it on the GTN, you can trade it. So it's only coming from master mode of Nathema. But if you don't play PvE, you don't want to play the new Flashpoint, which you should, but if you don't want to, you could just buy it off the GTN, you could buy it from someone, trade it, etc. So you'll be able to get those regardless of content, but it will be gated behind playing Master Mode Nathema. The materials are the exact same materials as the augments that came from Capero. And those materials drop from Master Mode, from Group Finder, Master Mode, Operation Bosses, and ranked Warzone missions. And then we're additionally adding them to a small crafting box on medium yield conquest planets and a large crafting box on large yield conquest planets, which will also drop those materials. Specifically because we heard feedback concerns from small guilds that large and medium guilds are just going to all flood down into small yield planets, and no one's ever going to go for medium or large because the rewards aren't worth it. Now there's rewards that you can only get by going for medium and large. So medium and large guilds should really be wanting to go for medium and large yields because they can get those materials. And honestly, it incentivizes small guilds to maybe try to go for a medium yield planet to try to get those rewards as well. And just a reminder, just in case people don't remember, you do not need to be on the leaderboard to get those rewards. You just need to break the yield target. So it should be something that even a small guild that really puts a lot of effort in might be able to get to even on a medium yield planet. So really that's just to try another incentive for large and medium guilds to really go for large and medium yields.
All right, I believe it was less than a month ago in the interview for the Bad Feeling podcast when Keith mentioned that these new augments are specifically targeted to the most hardcore players, so that's the endgame PvE, Operation Raiders, and possibly PvPers, ranked PvPers.
Yeah.
Okay, so to that end, why exactly do you include the crafting materials for big and bigger guilds, for the medium and for the large yields? To my knowledge, the augments will be required and obtained by hardcore guilds, which are usually smaller in size. Why do you not include those in the small yield? Why do you say that it's endgame tier, the new augments, and at the same time you're not providing the best way for endgame players, which are usually in small guilds, to earn them?
Yep. So the getting them through conquest is not the standard path of getting those materials. If you are an endgame ops group, even if you're a small guild, I would assume you're doing master mode operations, you're doing veteran mode operations, and you will be getting those materials from there as well. The medium and large is a supplementary way for that to happen. And one of the things is, and it's kind of the point, and funny enough, Keith made this point in the Bad Feeling interview as well, which is they are targeted at people who do endgame content, things like master mode operations, etc. But we know it's gear and everyone wants the best gear all the time, regardless of the content you play.
Right. No one is worse off for being more powerful.
Right. So by putting it on medium and large yield, it gives an opportunity for people to go get that gear. So someone who mainly is a solo player or something, it gives them another opportunity besides just buying it from the GTN, where they may be able to get some of those materials by doing them through conquest. And again, to the earlier point of, if you are a small guild and you're a very hardcore guild, this may actually incentivize you to try to go for something harder like a medium yield planet to try to get some of those resources.
Okay. Tell me, please, what exactly are the contents on those log boxes for the medium and large yield? How many crafting materials do we get inside?
I don't know. It's not a lot. I know that small, I think, is maybe a couple of resources. And then I know it's something around, don't quote me on this, but I think it's a small gives you almost enough to craft the Capero level of the materials required to craft the augments. Yes. The materials required, which I think is 2 of one resource and 1 of the other. I think it gives you either 2 or 3 from the small lockbox, and then whatever the requirements are going to be to craft the new ones, you will be just shy of getting. So if, let's say, it requires 6 materials, it'll give you 5 with the idea of you can't just solely do a conquest in 1 week to craft an augment. You would either need to supplement it with having it on multiple characters or doing some of the other content as well. Mm-hmm. So it's a slower progression doing it through conquest, but it is still a mechanism of doing it.
So the way I see the implementation of the new augments, it's to make people farm the new Flashpoint, 1, and to make them feel overpowered, right? And obviously to make a credit sink because of the economic of the game going a little bit down. Am I correct?
Everything. I would not argue anything you just said.
Yeah.
Can you confirm it?
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, let's move on to the next topic, conquest changes. You also posted, I believe, about a week ago. What are the plans for the conquest changes? Can you explain why, when, how? When is the legacy restriction going away?
So the legacy restriction isn't. The legacy restriction isn't restriction. What's a restriction? The legacy
it's
restriction.
My English. Don't copy me.
Oh man, I'm falling apart. It's not going to go away.
We'll adjust and
Correct.
tweak towards making it better.
Right. What's clear from the changes that we made when we introduced daily objectives, that does implement more of a legacy restriction on some people, especially if you play a lot of alts, because you have to either spread out your play over the week or you have to make hard choices about who you play and when. And so what that clearly highlighted for us is that we did not have enough infinitely repeatable objectives to supplement. Like, it is completely by design that there are 1 time per week objectives, and there are daily objectives, which are meant to be big bursts of points, with the idea of if you only play on 1 character, you can complete them pretty quickly. If you play on multiple characters, you can maybe spread that out over a couple of weeks or spread out the activities to really supplement getting a lot of points through objectives. But what we missed the mark on clearly was if I just play war zones, I don't have enough way to just continually get points. Like if I win once a day, once I've won, I kind of just don't get enough points to really want to keep playing that character. So what we wanted to introduce, and we've introduced a lot of, is infinitely repeatable objectives that don't matter what character, how many characters you play, it doesn't matter. You can play them and you'll continue to get points. And then over the week, because again, we really want to incentivize you to play multiple days a week. We want to incentivize you to play different content, that you will be able to get big bursts of points throughout the week across all the objectives. And so we're not going to lift the legacy restriction. The legacy restriction existed in the old conquest system. That's not a new thing. But what we clearly highlighted is we didn't have enough non-legacy based objectives for you to continue to earn points beyond the initial bursts of points. Right. And so that's what we're adding a lot of starting in 5.9.
I do have a weird feeling that this system is a lot more unfriendly to alt players, to altaholics, just like the Galactic Command was when 5.0 launched. Throughout several patches and months of fixes, the Galactic Command is very friendly to alts. When can we expect the conquest system to become friendly for alts?
Honestly, I think that it will be pretty close by the end of 5.9. When 5.9 goes out the door, I think we'll be pretty close. Because the one thing that, to be perfectly honest, there were some things about the old conquest that were unintended and or exploitable that we need to be cautious of, right? So I know that there was a lot of easy ways for people to get points. War supplies and crafting was amazing, and we want crafting to be good, but not the sole thing that you do entirely. And we know people doing lockout trading to be able to get really quick and easy points through operations. We want you to be able to get points from operations, but by playing the operation, not just by doing things that clearly aren't intended. And so we've made some of those changes, which definitely makes it harder to get points on alts. But that's because we want you to play the game in the intended way and play different activities and do some of those things. And we clearly did that in a more punishing way than we should have with 5.8. Yeah. We won't argue that for a second. That became very clear very quickly. And so the hope would be is that by the time we get to 5.9, you should really just be able to play pretty much any character you want, through any content you want, on any day in any conquest and be working towards fulfilling your conquest. That's really the goal.
Okay, last question on the topic of conquest, but it's actually more broader question that relates to pretty much everything else. Have you considered, and why not, rewarding players for participating in the public test server? And to that relation, why is the PTS not available? Why hasn't there been public server available for months, maybe years?
You want to answer I can answer the reward part. Do you want to answer the why no PTS part?
Yeah, I think, the big aspect for why we kind of got out of the habit of doing the public test is because we spent 2 years pretty much very focused on story, and story is something we don't usually put out early, right? It's something you can only really experience and that first time, like we said earlier, first impressions are everything. That first experience needs to be the best that it possibly can be to our mind. So philosophically, we don't generally put that kind of content out on a test server. Or unless it's a very restricted, very private test group. So over the course of Fallen Empire and Eternal Throne, we did very little test server use as a result of that. And I think, frankly, in a negative way, I think it was a mistake. We kind of got out of the habit of that as a result. And this past year, we should have been doing more of it. And this coming year, we plan to do more of it as a result. Because, the point is 100% valid, right? If this kind of thing is out and available for players to check out and really sink their teeth into beforehand, you will get that kind of feedback early, and it will go to the broader audience in a better state, hands down.
As for rewards, so there's two components to it. Rewards are actually exceptionally difficult for us to do on public test. It's hard. It's a hard thing for us to do, to track the things that people do on public test server and then give them the rewards back on their main account. It's pretty challenging to do, but we're actually actively working on ways to solve that problem,
right?
To make sure that that's a bit easier to do. And obviously we did it before, but behind the scenes, it's very unclean.
The amount of work that went into it is absurd.
And the second thing we have to do is it's hard for us to incentivize rewards, because the thing that we need to make sure is happening is that we're incentivizing doing the thing we actually want you to do, right? And so if it's like play 5 war zones, it doesn't stop someone from queuing and then sitting there AFK doing nothing and not actually playing the war zone. And if they're not playing, they're not giving us meaningful data, they're not giving us meaningful feedback. And so
they're causing others to not get meaningful feedback either.
And so it gets challenging, right? Because you bring up a very good point. Rewards are very important because participation is important. And I have plenty of stories I could tell, but even when we had open PTS, it's extremely common that no one played the content, or very, very few people did, but they were able to give the feedback based on what was there, which in of itself is valuable and something that we've been missing. And we kind of changed a little bit to being in the realm of, what if we tell you what's changing so you can give us feedback, as opposed to putting it on PTS, which is, as Charles pointed out, it's complicated for us to do if people aren't going to play it. But having rewards will then incentivize people to play it. So it's cyclical. And those are all the problems that we are actively talking about and solving now, so that we can get PTS in a timely way, so we can listen to feedback and make adjustments. We can incentivize it so that people actually go on and actually play the content, and then give us meaningful data and feedback to come out of it. And so having that whole loop closed is really important to make PTS worth doing.
And it is going to take some effort and some time on our part. So it's not necessarily like, next week we're going to have a lot more PTS all of a sudden. It's going to take a little bit of investment and time to make that a good process and something we can do more easily and more broadly. So it's not, we think that's important, and we're going to invest in it and take that time, but just want to be clear that it's not an overnight change.
And it's challenging, right? Because when we put something up on PTS, it needs to be pretty close to being done. Otherwise, the feedback's not meaningful. And that may mean that we're going to release it later than we originally intended, because we need that time. And so that's the other thing we have to battle is
maybe we have to be a little more flexible on our schedules than we have been previously.
We want that content in your hands the second it's done. And so by putting it on PTS, it may mean that it may be longer than a second. It may be 2 weeks and a second before we can actually put that out. And that's hard to battle, right? Like, you guys want content as fast as you can get it. So putting it on PTS may mean a little bit slower, but that also means higher quality, and we don't want to miss that mark either.
Right.
All right. Let me quickly jump on the next topic, because time is pressure, and I want to talk about the companions that are returning with 5.9. Can you tell us who is coming back, how and why?
Companions that are coming back in 5.9.
Oh, shit.
It's a Kavi and Mako.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah, that's a good one. Yes.
This is
okay, yes. No, you're right.
Can I explain Charles' face for a second? This is the Charles knows all of the companions that are coming back, and it's like
I have to remember which ones are where.
Which one's in 5.9?
There's so many of them coming over
I'm gonna be
several updates.
Oh, look,
I apologize.
Look, Vulkk even has it up on the stream.
Perfect.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, so Akavi and Mako, those two are actually coming back as a pair. So this will be an interesting situation where bounty hunters can get Mako back and also recruit Akavi if they want to. And then smugglers can get Akavi back and also potentially recruit Mako. Because the two of them have kind of been working together over the last few years since you last saw them. The other one is Felix Arreso, finally getting some consular love. Apologies for taking so long as it is. But be a chance to catch up with him as well, find out the unfortunately somewhat tragic circumstances he's been through in your absence as well, and hopefully get him into a better place.
Yep. And the why is because people want their companions back, I would say.
Yep.
They're coming back through similar type of missions like the previous companions, correct?
Right. Yes.
Why did you decide to make that change? I remember specifically Charles mentioning it somewhere, maybe during a live stream, maybe a year ago. Your plan was to deliver all the companions through meaningful missions. Why did you decide to switch that? Is it financial resources? Is it time constraints? Is it something else? You want to bring all the companions back before the expansion?
Yeah, I mean, a little bit of, many of those, right? We had a plan for the game, which was do a chapter a month indefinitely, which is how I would have intended to bring all the companions back over time, right? Most of them. There were a number that we did as Alliance alerts already, but especially romance characters. I would have preferred to release them in chapters if we had continued doing chapters. But as a team, as a business, as a design philosophy, we moved away from chapters. Wanted to focus on a broader set of content releases that we do over time, rather than being so laser focused only on story. It's better for the health of our game as a business overall, and it's I think better for the community because more people are getting the things they want.
Okay.
So
quick
it did lead to the sacrifice of then that means because we have less total story going out and using it in more specific ways, then some pieces have to be delivered differently.
Does that mean we shouldn't expect chapter story type of missions in the future? You're ditching that kind of storytelling?
We don't currently have any plans for more chapter style story. It depends on if you mean chapters as in like they function exactly the way that a chapter does, then no, there's no current plans to go back to that. Any future storytelling will be kind of more in the Shadow of Revan, Forged Alliances. That's more what we're targeting right now.
Do you have any plans to make the current Flashpoint stories repeatable? I mean, the stories, not the Flashpoint, with the chapters. Has that ever been considered?
Yeah, I've seen a lot of people bring that up, and also, any amount of our story, right? The class stories originally. Right. It's something we can kind of consider all of that from time to time. It's kind of takes a special layout of time to make it happen, just like anything else. And right now, it's not the top priority. But if it's something players really, really want, then speak up, let us know that should be a priority, and maybe we'll adjust things. But as it is right now, replaying story is something that a lot of people do, but it's not replaying the specific stories with a character that has already played them is not the top kind of thing that folks are seem to be clamoring for from the data that we gather. That's not necessarily a complete story though. So would love to hear it if feel differently.
Because we have got 11 minutes, according to what you've told me, quickly jumping to the last topic of 5.9. What are the changes to Cartel market? What are you planning to do? Why are there missing items from the currently ongoing sale? Are they going to be added next week, maybe?
So there's no new changes in 5.9 beyond the stuff that we've already done with 5.8. So the ultimate pack will still be there. Obviously, when the direct sale stuff ends in next week, 2 weeks, whenever that ends, the date.
It's a week from.
Yeah, my brain dates. That those will go away. The reason that some of them are missing is it's the same reason that when people brought up decorations. So when we originally started doing Cartel market items, obviously they were all in packs, and so there's a very big difference between. Behind the scenes is a very big difference technically between an item that comes in a pack and an item that is available for direct sale. There's a bunch of different work and different things that need to happen in order to set an item up to be available to be placed for direct sale in the Cartel market. And so it's something the team has been working on over time to get as many items as humanly possible ready to be available to be for direct sale. And obviously that's why we've had new items rolling over time as we've done more and more direct sale things. So really the things that weren't available for direct sale, it wasn't like an active choice of like, we're not putting that item up for direct sale. It's just, it hasn't been technically changed to be available for direct sale yet. So the goal absolutely is that every item that's ever been available on the Cartel market will eventually be available for direct sale in some capacity. Decorations are a little complicated in that regard because there's so many decorations. So it's possible that every decoration may not be available individually on the Cartel market, but it may be a part of a bundle or something like that. Right. Or there's crazy ideas of like, what if you could buy them right for the decoration interface or whatever? Like that's not a thing that's being worked on, but just, like
would be a cool.
It's the stuff that we talk about. Yeah. So yes, absolutely. The intent would be is if there's ever been an item on the CM, you can buy it for direct sale at some point. If this sale ever comes back, we introduce more stuff.
Right.
All right. Thank you. Let's move on to future updates. What can you tell us about what's happening after 5.9, 5.10 maybe? Returning companions, new content, PvP, new maps, new war zones, plans for tariff operation.
Lots of those things could happen.
Yeah, that's a good question. So what did we talk about? Did we want to get specific on the PvP thing?
Yeah, let's do that. So, we've got the very next update, there's probably going to be a 5.9.1 kind of late in May, but that's going to be very minimal. That's not really a content update.
Late May, okay.
Yeah, not something to get buzzed about. It's just a kind of housekeeping thing, I think, as it's currently conceived. Then the next, kind of media update after that, which I think right now internally we're calling it 5.9.2, but it might end up being a 5.10.
Yeah. The way we were joking before the calls.
No one really cares about the number. You want to hear what's in it, right?
Numbers don't matter. It's just the next time stuff's coming.
Yeah. So right now we're targeting July, and we're hoping to include a lot of PvP stuff in that update. And honestly, throughout the summer, we really want to make a lot of cool activities for PvP players this summer. Yep. Give them some love, kind of like we gave Ops a lot of love over the last year.
Yep. Also, what kind of PvP? Is it content or class fixes?
So content, I don't want to say a war zone yet. We're still kind of working out that kind of detail. We do have an arena that we feel pretty sure is going to fit into that.
Can we tell them where it is?
Yeah, it's cool. It's Shae Vizla's Mandalorian compound. So it's like a beast fighting pit with a lot of Mando decorations and primal stuff. It's really cool. So that's pretty definitely in there.
Some other stuff.
Also looking at maybe some kind of week-to-week PvP events, which would kind of maybe temporarily modify existing war zones in interesting ways. We're kind of boiling those details out there.
I do need details on that. What does that mean?
Sorry.
As a joking example, I'm going to say joking because I don't know that it's real. Like, what if for 1 week 8v8 was back? Like, not saying that's real, but those are the kinds of things we've talked about.
That would be on the less likely end of it.
Less likely end, right? But like, what if all of a sudden in Hutball everyone had 1 hit point?
Right, or what if it was the Rat Ghoul event and so suddenly there were Rat Ghouls in war zones? I don't. We're playing with a lot of different ideas right now, so that's why I don't want to be too specific.
So and the thing that I do want to
go ahead, Vulkk.
All of this is targeting July.
Currently, yes. July, possibly later in the summer as well, depending on if we're like, hey, we really like this thing, but it's not quite going to make July. Maybe we'll do it August or September. Yep. We're still playing with those dates a bit, which is, again, why we're being a little bit vague. But
and I do want
to give you a sense of the things we're thinking about.
Yeah, and I do want to reiterate, just because it's important for context setting, that right now, a new war zone may not happen as part of that. Mm-hmm. It's because of different challenges. So when we talk about different PvP stuff, it's going to be a diverse set of PvP things. But at least for right now, most likely that will not include a new war zone, just for expectation setting.
But we know that that's something people would really like, and so we are going to constantly push to see if we can fit one in.
But also some other unexpected stuff maybe. So
and also Stronghold we mentioned that is really cool. And
where is it?
Do you want to say?
That's your call.
We'll say Rishi.
Nice.
Yeah.
One quick related question to the Stronghold.
We have some special Stronghold enhancements that we want to kind of do related to that. And again, that's very in the testing phase to see if we can make it work. So I apologize for teasing a lot, but
early days, but some cool stuff we'd like to do.
Hopefully there's more to it than it just being a new Stronghold. Although even if it is just a new Stronghold, it's a very cool Stronghold. So I think people will be really pleased.
Yep.
Cool. Can you tell me something about returning companions in 5.9.2, 5.10, whatever? Who's coming?
I believe.
Where is the Emperor's Wrath?
I'm gonna get this. I'm gonna get this wrong, but I know Jaesa, Darkside Jaesa specifically, is in the hopper coming up soon. We have a lot of work done on Kira and Scourge as well, but there's a little bit more that needs to be done. So I don't think that's probably going to make July. It'll probably be a little later on. I apologize for that. I know it's something we really care about a lot too, and really want to get right. So apologize that that's taking a little longer. But
should we expect them to return in the same kind of short story, cinematic missions, not much of a story?
They will. Sorry, I'd rather not say yet. We'll tell you what. Expect shorter, and then if I can squeeze a little more in there, everyone will be happy. How's that?
Okay, quick question from Sao Paulo from Reddit. Why do so many people? Well, that's not exactly the question, but why do so many people want Vaylin, and will you bring her back?
It would be pretty unlikely that we would bring her back in terms of like, oh, hey, Vaylin's alive, surprise. That wouldn't really jive with the whole storyline. But, I'm certainly glad that she's so popular. She's certainly one of my favorite characters to write over the years.
One of my favorite responses ever was our cantina in London when someone asked Natasha Loring, who's the voice actress for Vaylin, about romancing Vaylin, and her answer was, she would eat you alive. That was her answer.
Yeah, Natasha is so great. She brings so much to that role. She's just a ton of fun to work with. So I would love to do it, but I currently can't think of a really reasonable or responsible way to fit that into the story. But who knows? You could always do a flashback, maybe a Force Ghost or something. That kind of thing could happen.
We call it a romance arc, and then she just kills you, and the flashback's over. I don't know. This is why I'm not a writer.
A quick general type of question. Will you agree that Star Wars: The Old Republic has seen less content in 2017 compared to 2016, and even less so in 2018 compared to the same time previous year? And why is that so?
It's a very good question. So this is something like we specifically talked with Keith about this type of question with the expectation that it might come up. And so one of the things that, yes, we'd agree, but sort of. So one of the things that I think a lot of people don't realize when they think about the things that we've done over the past year and a half, honestly into this year as well, is what Keith likes to call hardening of systems. You look at, yes, we just revamped Conquest, regardless of whether people felt it was good or not, but nonetheless, Activity Finder. Completely redid it. United Forces happened. Now, even taking the whole element of combining servers of United Forces out of the equation, you look at the fact that there was completely new hardware that was done, completely new, all kinds of behind the scenes things that happened. Like if you remember, the Harbinger used to be a bad word because it used to fall over, and it was a problem. It was a genuine problem, and that doesn't happen anymore. And so there have been a tremendous amount of things that the team has done behind the scenes, some of which you know of, like things like redoing Activity Finder, all the changes we made to Galactic Command. There's been a ton of system things that the team has done to just really just make the quality of life and the gameplay of the game better. Yes, in some cases that means we've delivered less content. That's true. We can understand if you compare it, it may mean that less actual pieces of things to play have come out. Mm-hmm. But the underlying systems and everything that goes into the game behind the scenes has gotten substantially better over time. And that's one of the things that was a real focus of the team when we talked about quality of life, was making those things better. And that's something that may even continue, And so the thing Keith joked about with me the other day when I was talking about it is like, you look at something like an expansion and you go, we've built a rock solid cement foundation to build up from if we do that. So it may mean that less content has come out, but really a large focus has really been building a really solid foundation and quality of life for older systems and improving those things.
I think also it's worth pointing out the variety is, I think, better in general, right? Like we spent well over a year delivering chapter. Obviously, I was very fond of chapters. I'm not trying to throw them under the bus here. Yep. Chapters were awesome, but in terms of storytelling and all that, but that was a very laser focused on one part of the audience. And I think we've done a better job of including more different sections of the SWTOR community.
Yep. And that can't be lost either, right? Because when we were just delivering,
and that's not easy to do.
Right. We were just delivering 16 chapters, right? Like everything was, what about ops? What about war zones? What about every other component of the game? And so there's different work that comes in with when we're building everything at this point, right? There's very few sets of players that haven't gotten some kind of content in the past year or so. And so the hope would be to continue that. Diversity of content has been way better than it was before. And admittedly, we've done a lot more stuff that isn't just pure content to try to make the game better in general. Yeah.
Okay, summer events. What can we expect?
Summer events.
Well, we've talked about bringing back Nightlife. Probably for a shorter stint this time.
Yep. Get your Gamorrean guard here.
Yes.
How about the Dark vs. Light version 2?
Not currently, but it's
way
interesting.
better than Casino.
So it's funny because I remember when Dark Versus Light came out, there was mixed opinions, I think, in the community. So
I
it's
didn't
cool
like
to see
it,
that
but
people
it's way
kinda
better than
come
the
around to
casino.
it.
Is 5.9? We've talked about a mechanism that is not DBL for people to get hexed.
Yes, I believe that is in 5.9. But
so what it is, from my recollection, and I could be completely lying about what I'm about to say, but I know it was discussed about allowing people to get hexed through an achievement that is just permanent. There is a new permanent achievement, which
takes a lot more work than the previous one did.
Doing a lot of stuff. So like, I'm just making things up, like 50 flashpoints, 50 war zones, and you can get hexed, like whatever. It's some very large thing that is way different than what you had to do previously. But we've talked about reintroducing that in the similar way that there was gameplay required to get hexed, just more now, because we know that there's been people that were sad they missed hexed, and so Reynos obviously not going to go anywhere near that because that's a whole different party.
That was a very special.
But hexed at least letting people get it. So I'll double check. When I send you the screenshot, remind me of this question, and I will verify that what I just said is actually a true statement, because I might have just lied.
It's coming sometimes.
Quick questions from the chat tonight. Do we expect the weekly process to ever come back, and why?
Interesting. We've definitely talked about that a lot. I don't want to give a specific announcement right now because it's just been discussions right now, but it's something we recognize as very desirable. And so perhaps some version of that will come back, but very, very tentative, just something we're discussing right now. We'll let y'all know first if something gets locked down.
And it's not like we are adamantly against them.
Yeah, not at all.
It's immense complication related to Galactic Command. Largely, there's a lot of tech reasons that the passes just don't function anymore.
Right. So it's not bringing them back. It's actually building a whole new type.
Correct.
Or several types, as it is. So.
All right. What are the plans for the upcoming subscriber promotions?
We're tentatively identifying something for May. I don't want to put it out quite yet.
If it is brand new.
Yeah.
Just
so I won't be screwed over as a current subscriber.
Right. Appeasing any of the concerns and understandable feedback we got around like Nico Shae. No, it will be a completely new thing for subscribers.
Another question I've picked up from Reddit from Sasa177. How is the limit of decoration hooks being decided when designing a stronghold? What does it depend on? And is it a technical or hardware limitation? How can a guild ship have 800, for example, and the Yavin stronghold have more than this?
Performance,
I believe. Increase the hooks is the general question, I suppose.
I believe performance is the answer to that question.
Yeah, it's the main limitation.
To
some degree, the layout, right? It depends on
how many walls
are the walls round or flat. Then we can put different numbers of hooks up, that kind of thing as well. So a combination of performance and just the design of the area that it's in.
Okay, Magic on the chat has been killing me all evening long to ask about Theron customization. Why is Theron's appearance like this, and can we change it back to something else? Do you guys have any plans to release customization for companions?
Is that
the ability to I feel like
I'm going to put it this way, because I have to be a little cagey on this, because I feel like this is a fairly stealthy way to get me to confirm something that I don't want to confirm. But I will say that request has been very much noted and taken in by the team. And so in a world where if you did get Theron back, and I'm not saying you do because that would be a spoiler, but we would likely provide that.
So can you provide any hope for people who romanced Theron after 5.9?
Not without spoiling things.
Yeah. You gotta come back and see. But I think they'll be pleased.
Okay, that's another question I almost missed to ask. Why did you not use Timothy's presence for 5.6 to its full potential? Why was so much lore missed out of 5.6, and are you planning to repeat that mistake in 5.9? We need more lore in Nathema.
I guess I'd need to know exactly what you felt was missing in particular. We definitely worked with
general knowledge about, in this case, about the blue species.
And
for Nathema, just general knowledge about the story of the planet. For example, people who haven't read the book and may not know what exactly the ritual in Nathema is about. Maybe things like that.
Yeah.
Why is there no more lore included in these things?
Yeah, well, I think it's tricky because you either slow the whole thing down to explain it, and not everyone is going to be interested in it, despite my own personal interest in it being quite high. You have to understand that that's not the whole audience. It's also when it's a flashpoint versus a broad explorable planet or a chapter, you've got a different expectation for the pacing and how much time you're going to spend asking questions about, the city and the plants and the GDP of the local economy and stuff like that, which could end up being really interesting to some people, but is probably not interesting to a lot of people. So it kind of just has to do with the pacing of the particular content that we're doing. So when it's a Flashpoint, you tend to get a little bit less. Nathema has more than Copero did, for sure, in terms of just learning more about what's Darren been up to, who are these people that are conspiring against you, and what has happened to this planet kind of in the intervening time since the last time you were there, to some degree, along with maybe a little bit other things that I won't reveal. But in general, when it's a Flashpoint, we don't tend to stop and smell the roses quite as much as we do in other kinds of content.
Apparently, the current Cartel market sale is a huge hit. Do you plan to leave these items for the future? Do you plan to bring it back? When and why? I know that the current one ends on 17th, right?
Right. We don't currently have any plans to extend that current event, but yeah, it's definitely been a big success. So I think it's very, very likely that you'll see it again in the future. I don't know that it would be like a super frequent thing, but definitely, I certainly bought a whole bunch of stuff on it when it happened. So I would look forward to bringing it back just as much as y'all would.
We'll have to do one more question, Vulkk, because I have to run.
Can I ask two, one serious, one joke? Okay.
Yes.
Will you agree that the engine for the game was not the best choice, and does the company in general regret picking this engine?
It's a tricky question. We're barely, I know we've said this a million times, we're barely on the engine that, it's basically a custom engine at this point anyway.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's...
Well, and also, neither of us would have been involved in the engine decision when it was made many, many, many years ago.
Community managers don't pick the engine for the game?
I don't even think E.Musco was on the team yet, and I was not someone who would have been involved in that decision. So without knowing the other options, I feel like it would be a little bit irresponsible to say this was a good or bad choice, not knowing what the other options really were.
I think it's one of those things a lot of people just look and they're like, oh, they can't do this because of the engine. You're like, every game engine, I'm not a developer, every game engine has pros and cons.
I've never talked to anyone who said their game engine was great and did everything they wanted it to. Right. Never once, ever.
Game development.
Okay, last question, and it's the most important for me. When is Malgus coming back?
Who? Is that the guy in the lobby? Is that guy?
I think he's in the lobby. Does that count?
It's the guy I paid $300 for, basically.
Oh.
The collector's edition, I mean.
The one in the lobby, I think, is worth way more than $300.
I will say someone did actually fix that Wikipedia article for me.
That's true.
I'm very appreciative of that.
That's true.
I feel like now my options are open to back up a bit.
There you go. That's all it took. It just took someone updating a Wikipedia page. Now the world is open before us.
No, but you avoided the question. When is he coming back?
That is strange how we did that, isn't it?
Okay, yeah, I never expected an answer to that, but you will bring him back, because otherwise.
But what happens when the day we actually answer that question?
I know.
Would that be amazing?
I know. It's going to just...
We're just building the anticipation for the day we may never probably answer that question.
Yeah, you spent a lot of money for that 30 seconds bootleg video that was released, 3 years ago?
For which? Yeah, well, that was
the Malgus in Carbonite eventually.
Oh, we actually didn't spend any money on that. Yeah. Like I explained before, that was a theoretical, a part that was in a script that was cut before they ever produced it, scene. So it was never really it was in a very early phase of it, and then when we went to, I think, San Diego
Comic-Con,
we brought out the leads of the team, the directors of that cinematic, and they had always really enjoyed that idea of an Easter egg. We ultimately didn't feel like it was appropriate to the video, and we, for a number of reasons, so we cut it. But they always really enjoyed that idea of what if he really was just kind of stuck in a block of carbonite somewhere, just waiting to pop out and wreak havoc. And so they actually spent the time to produce a simplified, somewhat version of it, to share with the fans at that event, just because they thought it was so cool and would be a really fun Easter egg.
If you guys knew all the stuff that we planned and did just for the sake of our own fun,
but we're live. You could share some of them.
There's some good ones. Well, I will tell you, there is one that was one of Charles's ideas, which is still to this day. Charles is gonna know what I'm talking about. My favorite idea ever for a thing to do in the game, but it may actually happen someday.
Mm-hmm. So now we can't talk about it.
Now we can't talk about it. But the second we tell you what it is, if it ever happens, you will know that this is what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But I can't.
When it happens, you're like, oh, that's the one Musco talked about.
That's the one Musco talks about. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I do have quite a lot more questions, and I could have asked something else. Maybe the audience will be unhappy because we didn't touch on the next expansion. Even if I ask you, I know that you guys would never answer because, well, you probably know some things, but you're not
It's a
allowed to
ways
tell me.
out. I don't. We mention it because we want folks to know that we do want to do one and are planning to do one, but it's got some time. Don't get too worked up on it yet.
Yep.
We'll start talking.
I would like to thank you very much for your appearance and for accepting this invitation for today.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, it was great. And we will get you that screenshot someday.
Yes.
That screenshot will happen. It will. We'll get to show
very
that
soon.
Very soon.
Thank you. Enjoy your weekend, guys, and hopefully we can do something of that kind soon. Again.
Yeah, we'd love to do this again. This is great.
Absolutely.
Last demand, we need more merchandise. We actually need any merchandise because people have been asking, even now I've been asking Eric for years, why the hell are these t-shirts not for sale?
Take it to Lucasfilm, take it to Disney.
Yeah,
take it to Lucasfilm and Disney. It's not actually up to us. They have that part of it. So let them know that you want it, and I bet they'll be interested in doing it.
Yeah.
Let them know. Or keep coming to Cantinas because we give it to you for free.
That's true. Also an option.
Yep.
Yeah, if I could come to the cantina,
the next one's coming to you. It's coming to your backyard, man.
It's just one world apart. What's
Fire up the barbecue.
Yes,
you're hosting.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you very much, guys, once again, and enjoy your weekend. I'm going to say a few more words to my audience after we close up.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you for having us.
Yeah. Take care.
Okay. Let me actually bring up everything that I was not using while talking to my guests, like, for example, the chat for the live stream. That was it. I know that you guys, some of you expected more, some of you probably expected less. I was glad that they decided to share some details that probably nobody knew about 5.92 or 5.10 or whatever it's coming in July. We all knew that they were never going to release any details past that, and we know kind of. Well, I hope they explained it well. I can't really explain it better than that because it wouldn't be cool of me. But they are not allowed to speak of things ahead of time for good legal and not so legal reasons. I hope that you were satisfied with the answers and with the questions today. I was always aiming to make this a discussion and more like a presentation for majority of time, obviously 5.9, and with a good chunk of what's coming next. I knew that they would not share too many details about what's coming past the second update, so I thought it was going to be 5.10. Apparently it may be 5.9.2. I don't know why the hell they haven't decided on the numbers, but it doesn't really matter too much in the end. We know that the next patch is coming 1st of May. The addition to the patch is eventually coming the end of May, and then another hopefully big patch is coming somewhere in July. I would bet 17th of July because that's a popular date for releases for quite some number of other games, MMOs and not so MMOs. I don't know if 17th of July is something special in legal terms, in financial terms, but whatever. I'm sure that you guys would have a lot more questions. Probably some of the answers were not to your satisfaction. I did my best to ask all of the questions that I had here in these. My patrons have some exclusive materials available if they want to check them out, including these handwritten notes after I actually completed my notes for this live stream. I have been, well, not working on this, but aiming to do this for about a month, since when I realized that actually I have an opportunity to speak to those. Initially, I wanted to speak to one, but they decided both to appear because both of them could speak and tell me different things about different aspects from the game. There were some questions that they clearly were not, well, not allowed, but maybe qualified to answer, like the question for the engine. I was absolutely perfectly clear that they're not going to be able to answer. They will probably not be allowed to answer questions as to when can we see another class released, probably never. When can we see another Warzone? Hopefully all of you by this point realize that my April Fool's joke about Tari's operation was a joke. It's not a real operation. It's not coming, or maybe it is. We'll have to wait and see. I don't know why, but when Keith mentioned that he's fond of the idea of releasing big single purchase cartel market item sale on the Bad Feeling podcast interview about a month ago, I would assume that sale that is currently online in the game was already in the works and already being planned, so he was probably playing in nice words. And to that end, I would like to also say thank you to Diana Audia, who's just mentioned something in the chat, so I managed to see. Diana is my latest what the hell is the word, sponsor here on YouTube. Sponsor is something that's exclusive to YouTube and more likely to YouTube gaming, with some exclusive bonuses, kind of like the subscription on Twitch. Thank you very much. Thank you to all of you guys for joining today's live stream. I don't think if I can say anything else to finish this, but I hope to see you very, very soon with some kind of more regular content, whether it's Star Wars: The Old Republic or something else. I hope that we'll see each other very, very soon, and let's keep pressure up, because no matter how much I wanted to curse about the game's flaws today in front of the two guys, it wouldn't make any difference. They read all of these things on the forums and everywhere else. As a matter of fact, I don't know if it's only E.Musco or maybe a number of the developing team, but probably just E.Musco, and then sending the feedback to other people within the studio. They do follow what people are saying. They're aware what's happening on the forums, on Reddit, on fan websites, on YouTube. They know that we don't like this or hate that or we adore those things. They're perfectly aware of that. So me naming and shaming these things right now on the stream wouldn't have meant anything really positive, because I wouldn't be telling them anything new and I wouldn't be able to get from them any decent answer. I aimed all of tonight's discussion to be constructive and informative. I really wanted to have those. Well, I aimed for several exclusive images, and by exclusive I don't mean to show off that I'm the first person to display those. That's just images. But all of these animated backgrounds that you see behind me, I made those from the Nathema chapter from Eternal Throne, and I wanted something cool to add to this in terms of new environment from the new Flashpoint. I also wanted other things to get access to, but unfortunately you need, like, I don't know, to go through 1 million instances and 1,000 approvals from different departments and people before you're allowed to give out to the community something exclusive like this. Probably because we're 3-4 weeks ahead of the release. And this originally, by the way, was supposed to be just talking about the upcoming changes to the events. I was not originally planning to ask anything about content past the 5.9. This was, in my mind, originally just E.Musco helping me present what's happening with the next update. Something similar to what I always do when we see the patch notes before the update, for example. But this time I asked Musco to help me and do these things ahead of time before everything is released, so we can actually talk exclusive things and new things to spice things up. With that said, I think you guys have grown tired of me, so thank you very much for your participation. Good night and enjoy your weekend. I'm going to